So let's jump right into love-hate. We always start with the running backs. And listen, we love the Detroit running backs. We'll get to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery later on in What's on Tap. So don't think we're completely skipping over that dynamic duo today. But we start with Derrick Henry, Matthew, who has not had the typical Derrick Henry season, but the Panthers can be the elixir for a struggling running back.
Two first names always a crowd pleaser, as is the Carolina running defense, right? They have allowed the most rushing touchdowns to running backs this season. They've given up at least one rushing touchdown in 8 out of 10 games, including to Tony Pollard.
Finally.
Right? Tony Pollard hadn't scored since week 1, and then he finds the Carolina Panthers. He finds the end zone. Panthers also allow the second most rushing yards per game, 4th highest yards per carry to opposing running backs. Running backs that get at least 15 carries against the Panthers, averaging over 22 fantasy points per game. Derrick Henry should get 15 carries against the Panthers, especially with Will Levis showing up on the injury report yesterday as well. It's early in the week. Not really worried about it just yet, but still, Henry should be a focal point of this offense against Carolina. I'm at running back 8. I know it's been tough this year, but I'm in on Derrick Henry this week.
Has been tough for King Henry. He's RB16 on the season, which feels kind of dirty to say about such a legend.
By the way, that's better than I would have thought because he's been so up and down.
Yeah, he has been. And look, by PFF grade, he's the number 2 running back in football. I still think he's the same guy. I think he looks explosive to me. He looks like the same kind of physical marvel. It's just he's going into these stack boxes. There's just no space in the offense. And the problem for him has just been that Will Levis just, after a really bright start, has kind of come back to earth. But against the Carolina Panthers, who have the worst run defense in football, if there was ever a time for him to go crazy, it's this week.
Their line's banged up as well. The Titans' line
it
was bad to start the season, and then it's gotten it's gotten hurt. So, yeah, I'm with you, Connor. So anyway, we all like King Henry as a top 8 play this week.
Our next one, Rhamondre Stevenson, another guy, kind of an uneven season here, Jay. But for Matthew, he comes in as RB15 in a similar scenario where he has the Giants, and we think New England. We don't even know who's going to be quarterback, which kind of tells you we know the running backs are going to get a heavy workload.
Indeed, and the key for Rhamondre is just he had 20 carries last week, 2 weeks ago, in a loss as well against Indianapolis. So any running back who's had 20 carries and now is about to go up against Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants, where you suspect that DeVito's not going to be having long 7-minute drives to keep New England off the field. They're clearly going to lean on their running game. Rhamondre just looks a little bit better physically than he did at the start of the season too, where he's so sluggish, so in mud, much like he was at the end of last season too, where he's constantly on the injury report. But expecting a big day for Rhamondre, Matthew.
I am. I am with you on the workload, especially because, again, whether it's Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones or Will Grier or Malik Cunningham or some mixture, I think whoever it is just going to be handing off or pitching out. You love the matchup with the Giants as well. 140 scrimmage yards to opposing running backs as well. They've given up 100 yards to running backs in 9 of 11 games so far this year. And Rhamondre, even though the quarterback situation is very questionable, the one thing that seems to be working is they are getting the ball to their running backs. The positives of Stevenson, who wasn't involved in the passing game early in the season, lately now has very quietly 5 straight games with a target share of at least 14%, including, it's not like a massive workload, but at least it's something in the passing game that sort of keeps his floor high. I also like Zeke. He's on my others receiving votes again. I bet you Zeke gets in the end zone. I think Stevenson is a top 15 play this week because they do not want anyone to throw it against the Giants.
Just quickly on the quarterback situation for New England, Mac Jones said in regard to a question of whether he was starting, he said, "I hope so. That's the plan, I think." Which doesn't really fill you with a great deal of confidence about whatever's going to happen in New England.
It's almost like he corrected himself from spilling the beans.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
It's a disaster, New England.
Maybe they'll go college football and they'll alternate drives.
Yeah, I think fantasy-wise it doesn't really matter. If you have Mario Douglas, you probably prefer Mac Jones. I just think Mac Jones is safer in terms of a guy who just throw the ball.
Semi-competent, as well. So anyway, but just Ezekiel Elliott, who, by the way, just real quickly to wrap up the Patriots, I'll just say this about Ezekiel Elliott. He had 88 yards from scrimmage the last time we saw the Patriots play 2 weeks as well. He's getting a lot of work inside the red zone, inside the opponent's 10-yard line. Again, they've given up a lot of touchdowns as well. Giants, one of the teams in the NFL that give the most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Zeke gets into the end zone on Sunday.
Some others receiving votes that all sneak into the top 20. Rachaad White comes in as RB16 for the Bucs against the Colts. Jaylen Warren, who no Matt Canada now. That's a good sign maybe for Jaylen Warren's workload as he's got the Bengals. He comes in as RB19, and Kyren Williams right there at RB20 in his return, or expected return, Matthew, against Arizona.
I don't think people realize how good Rachaad White's been because the team is sort of bad. He's not really exciting. It's more of a volume play, but he's had at least 90 yards in 4 of the past 5, and Colts over the last month give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. In terms of Jaylen Warren, I think his lack of usage is one of the reasons why Matt Canada is looking for a job Thanksgiving week. 3 straight games with 100 total yards, but the touches just he's been highly efficient. So I expect a higher workload for him against a good Cincinnati defense, good in the sense that it's a good matchup.
Yes.
Like they're a bottom 10 run defense over the last month. And the only question on Kyren Williams is workload. In his first game back, does he get a full workload? Because the match with Arizona is terrific. Over the last 4 weeks, only one team in the NFL gives up more fantasy points per game to opposing running backs than your Arizona Cardinals.
My Arizona Cardinals. Okay, interesting. Just add them to the list of my many teams.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I do on the day before I die. Is just love the Arizona Cardinals. People might have forgotten as well. You mentioned how people don't realize how good Rachaad White is, RB6 on the season. People might have forgotten just how good Kyren Williams was before he went down.
Yeah.
In terms of points per game, he's 4th among running backs in fantasy this year. He was an absolute monster, and he's playing every snap. So even if he doesn't play every snap, if he's at 60, 70% of the snaps, still think he's going to be a very viable starter.
And it's not like they've had a replacement since he's been hurt that's really popped off. So when he's ready to go, I think Sean McVay will lean on him.
Darrell Henderson waived as well.
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So just
Correct.
Royce Freeman there. All right, let's move over to the hate list. Alexander Mattison does not make it in the top 30 running backs. He's RB33 against the Bears, Jay, which we've talked about with the Bears. Sometimes they could be good against the run. You more so care about your pass-catching running backs against them. And Mattison also could be dealing with quite a workload share with Ty Chandler as well.
I think so. Also coming off the fumble against the Broncos, which was really key.
Yeah.
Ty Chandler just looks better. It's
He
like
does.
we talked about yesterday, this is kind of an analog to the Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris situation where Mattison, I understand they want him in there for his pass blocking, and that gives him a certain floor, I think, in terms of snaps that he's going to see. He still saw 64% of snaps against the Broncos, but now he gets a really tough matchup against the Bears. The Bears are a pass funnel defense because they have an elite run defense and a very poor secondary. So I expect that this is going to be more of a Josh Dobbs game, and maybe Ty Chandler gets more involved too, Matthew.
Since week 5, they allow the fewest rushing yards per game to running backs. They also allow just 3.4 yards per carry to opposing running backs. That is best in the NFL, to your point. And you just saw there, he got 64% of the snaps and got 7 fantasy points, whereas Ty Chandler basically doubled him. And I'm with you. To the eye test, just Chandler looks like the better running back. So Mattison, outside my top 30, bad matchup in a timeshare. He might not be any good.
I don't
Alexander
think he's
Mattison.
very good. No.
Yeah. I think we've seen
Good in pass
enough
point.
to know that at this point.
Yeah.
In the same game, other backfield, though, Khalil Herbert comes in as RB37 against the Vikings, who, Matthew, the Vikings' run defense has really gotten it together over the last month.
4 of the past 5 games, they've held opposing running backs to under 50 yards rushing. Here's the entire list of running backs that scored at least 14 fantasy points against the Minnesota Vikings. Chris McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift. That's the list. All due respect to Khalil Herbert, who's in a timeshare with Deontay Foreman and Roschon Johnson, and we don't really know how it's all going to work out. Like, even if he was getting all the run, he ain't Chris McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, or DeAndre Swift. So after Deontay Foreman left the game with that injury, he played only 58% of the snaps. So Roschon Johnson played 42%, including there was only 1 third down that Roschon Johnson wasn't out there. So Herbert doesn't, at least at the moment, appear to be involved in the passing game. There's a chance that Foreman is back, and now it's a 3-headed committee. Bad matchup. Herbert outside my top 35 this week. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.